Do you remember playing outside during recess and we would play in the trees a lot?
Yes.
Do you remember how it kind of like felt like we would lose track of time? And it's like, you kind of got like the sense like, hey, are we lost right now? Do people know where we are?
Yeah, I remember like the trees at our middle school and we would like climb them and it was just so fun.
Yeah, like it was kind of like it's our own little world and we were lost in the trees. But I always got like this kind of lingering sense where it's like, okay, like we're in the trees. And to be honest, our middle school wasn't that big, so I don't know why I made such a big deal out of it. But it's also like, what happened if we got kidnapped or what happened if we died? Like, would anyone ever find us? Realistically, our playground was like pretty small and the trees were like maybe 5 steps off of it. So yeah, they would have been able to find our bodies.
Yeah.
But I don't know. As a kid, everything always felt so much bigger than what it actually was. Like, especially like if you come to like Calgary and you're like, whoa, I'm in the big city now. Oh, there's skyscrapers and they're so high. And like now it's like, whoa, they're like kind of small. Or maybe that's just like my ego's too big now. I don't know.
No, I get that because it's like when you come from like Red Deer and then you go to Calgary and it's just like so much bigger, but then you go to like LA and you're like, oh,
Yeah, you're like, wow, the world really is so big. But it actually is that big. Especially, I find I have like this kind of wanderlust when I look at the world. It's like, okay, like someone really can just like have their everyday life, their family, their kids, whatever, their pets, they have a job. People know them. And then all of a sudden, one day, they'll just go missing. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. It was the discovery of two deceased electronic technicians on a remote hillside near Rio de Janeiro. They were clad in formal suits and raincoats despite this sweltering August weather. Each of them had a crudely fashioned iron mask on their faces, and immediately, there was an enigma that surrounded the countryside where they died for decades, with no defining resolution. It's a perplexing scene where they were found. There was a cryptic note found near the bodies, which hinted at a planned sequence of events that culminated in the use of their peculiar masks. And there's all sorts of weird shit that happens in today's case. There's not only police negligence that happens regarding finding out how they died. There's a possible like gang. There's a government cover-up, maybe, where the FBI and the military got involved. And then there's also aliens involved in today's case.
aliens.
Yeah. This is the case of the unsolved mystery of the lead mask case. Hi, and welcome to the Decomposing Fire podcast. We are excited to have you with us as we delve into some truly intriguing and occasionally true crime cases. I'm your host, Kira, and with me is Jen. Everything we say in our podcast is information that we've gathered through testimonies, interviews, documents, and trustful sources. Any opinion we say is our own opinion. If we get any information wrong, and today's case is very confusing, there's a lot of like, it could be this, it could be that, hypothesis this. Everything's kind of up for speculation, but feel free to let us know what you think in the comments or what you think might have happened. We mean no disrespect to any of the victims or anyone affected by this case. Today, we're going to be discussing the lead masks case. But before we get started, I just want to let you know we're going to be talking about some aliens. So if you're like, yo, I don't check out with any of those alien things, go check out our other podcasts. Feel free to grab yourself a snack, sit down, because this one is going to be a long one. On the afternoon of August 20th, a young boy who was just flying a kite, as we do, especially when it's really nice. Like the day before, there had just been like this incredibly strong rainstorm. And I mean, it's in Rio de Janeiro. So there's kind of this weather pattern where it's like, okay, it's sunny 1 minute. You kind of know day by day how it's going to turn out. Today, it just happened to be a really gorgeous day. It was super hot and he was just flying his kite, and there was this hill that he was flying it over. It's called Vietnam Hill, and he stumbled across a scene that would ignite decades of speculation. He was an 18-year-old boy named Jorge da Costa Alves. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I tried my best. And this happened in 1966. There was this smell. It was pungent. And it's not something that you would expect to smell on a sunny day. I mean, maybe you would smell the fresh smell of grass, the clean air, especially just after the stretch of rain that they have gotten. Maybe the sense of dew, or from the nearby beach, maybe some salt from the ocean. But this wasn't that. Instead, there was a strong, unmistakable stench of thick rot that permeated the air. Jorge looked around for the source. He wouldn't stop until he found it. I don't know. Maybe it's like the feeling of the unknown. And like when you smell something that strong, you're like, damn, like what is that? Obviously, you're not expecting maybe the worst thing. You're like, okay, maybe it's a stink bug, or like there's like someone who needs help. Maybe, I don't know, it could be like an animal who like lost a leg and you need to help it. But when he saw two pairs of legs outstretched in the grass, at first he thought it was just two men taking a nap. But when he kept watching, there were bugs flying all over, and the smell was indescribable. What he was smelling was death. Their appearance was strikingly unusual. They were both dressed in formal business suits, over which they wore a waterproof raincoat, which was pretty weird given the warm weather and the lack of rainfall on that day. But most notably, each man wore a homemade mask that was crafted out of sheets of lead, which covered their eyes. When he first watched the bodies, there was no apparent sign of trauma that indicated a sign of struggle. Near the corpses, he noted there was an empty water bottle, a packet that contained 2 wet towels, and a small notebook. Instantly, he ran off to the police to go report. He just found some dead bodies. The police took a couple days to get there, and we'll get into it in a moment here when I get into the timeline of everything. But the police took a couple days to get there, and when they did, they noticed that the vegetation appeared to be deliberately cut with a sharp tool, which maybe could have been done by the guys, or it could have been done by someone after. But either way, there was a level of preparation in that location that was not typical for accidental death or chance encounters. Whatever happened was planned. And the wet towels, among the other personal effects, was also pretty noteworthy, as well as some notes that were found nearby. The 2 men were later identified as Manuel Piera da Cruz, who was 32, Miguel Jose Vivana, who was 35. Both were electronic technicians who resided in Campos dos Juegos, a town that was located northeast of Rio de Janeiro. On August 17, 1966, was the last time they saw their families. They intended to travel to Sao Paulo to produce work materials, they said, and possibly purchase a vehicle. However, they deviated from this path and actually went to Niterói, a decision that was perhaps a concealed motive or an alteration to their initial plans. They journeyed by bus, arriving at approximately 2:30 p.m., and they were able to piece together where they went through witness testimonies and recovered evidence at the scene. Initially, they purchased some raincoats at a local store and mineral water. The waitress who served them recalled Miguel exhibiting signs of nervousness and frequently checking his wristwatch. Notably, they kept the receipt for the water bottle, implying that they had the intention to return the empty container for a refund. This was the last known sighting of Cruz and Viviana alive. Viviana, maybe like that. I'm trying to pronounce their names right. I'm really trying. But this wasn't the only thing that was suspicious regarding their kind of movements that day. Manuel had been carrying a significant amount of money on him, estimated at around a lot of Costa Rican dollars. Some sources corroborate that it's like 2.3 million Costa Rican dollars, or I don't know. Some people put in too many zeros. I don't know Costa Rica dollars, but it was a lot of money. It wasn't found on their persons, which indicated a possible robbery or something. Either way, things got a little bit weird. And I'm going to go into breaking down the timeline of it because this case gets wild. And I really want us to have a clear timeline of events here. So it all started with an explosion. Sometime in June 1966, there was a homemade artifact that exploded in Manuel's home. And then everything else continued on August 17th. Manuel told his wife that him and Miguel would be going to Sao Paulo to buy a used car, like we said, and some electronic components for their shop. He got a large sum of money, and then he put in 2 towels with all the money. And some friends knew that they were going to Sao Paulo as well, not only his wife. And they asked Miguel and Manuel to bring them some things from Sao Paulo, which they also gave him more money. They went on the bus and they were intending to meet their friend El Kyo. I'm just going to call him E. Their seat numbers were 25 and 26. But instead of going to Sao Paulo, they went to Niterói, which was another city. They went to an electronic shop and they had a conversation with Hernandi, who was the owner. He'd been with them 4 days before at Campos. At that occasion, Manuel showed Hernandi a magazine ad for an AM/FM frequency generator, which was valued at more than $1 million, their currency. And they asked for some components, but the store had none in stock. Hernandi thought this was a little bit weird because Miguel and Manuel were experienced technicians and would have known that these components would not normally be found in this city. But upon leaving, Manuel and Miguel invited Hernandi to go along with them to Sao Paulo so they could try finding the components there. But he declined, and in the shop, 2 other people also witnessed this conversation. So it's not just him. It was another employee and a taxi driver. The whole time they seemed to be quite rushed and in a hurry, and after that, it started raining. So they went to go get raincoats. Although they didn't immediately wear the raincoats when they left the store. In the store, testimonies say that both the men appeared to be calm, but there's 21 minutes that are unaccounted for at some time in this part, in between them leaving with the raincoats and getting to the next place where they got some mineral water. And it's reported that he looked agitated the next time he was seen. So they speculate that Miguel and Manuel must have encountered someone in between in that time. So they purchased a bottle of mineral water, right? And they got the receipt so they could get refund for the bottle. Miguel, the whole time, he's checking his watch. And at 4:30, they're expected to have arrived on the hill. Now, it's interesting to note that night, a woman and her 3 children were driving around the hill area when they saw some lights in the sky. This is where we get into some really weird shit. And they stopped to get out of the car and watch these lights for about 4 minutes. She describes them as bright oval orange, and they have like a ring of fire which emits blue rays of light in many directions, moving up and down the hill. She goes home and tells her husband. He goes to the location, but he doesn't see anything. They decide not to tell anyone until the bodies are eventually found. It's also interesting to note that this wasn't the only time their bodies were found. So, before the boy had found them, the kite guy, right? There was another boy who was hunting small animals on top of the hill when he had seen 2 men lying dead on the ground. He wasn't sure if they were sleeping or dead, so he quickly ran away, went home to a local policeman named Antonio, and he told him about the bodies. And he didn't say anything too much. He was like, yeah, it's fine. They're probably just napping. Don't worry about it. And he did nothing about it. So that was on I believe the 19th or the 18th. Somewhere around there. On the 20th, their bodies are found. So later that afternoon, he tells the police, but the police decide to do nothing about it because it's getting late and there's also some bad weather. So they decide not to climb the hill that afternoon. On the 21st is the day the police reach the bodies, and they find exactly what had been described. They're dressed in identical formal suits, wearing raincoats, and they're easily identified because they have their personal documents on them, which is a little bit weird. There's signs of blood that that were apparent on their mouth and their nose, and they were lying on their back in some kind of palm leaf tree. So like they made like a bed out of palm leaves, or whoever put their bodies there. I don't know. It gets weird. And there's signs of blood on the leaves. This is the kind of palm leaf that can only be cut with a knife, but none are found at the scene. On the scene of the crime, the men find these items: a bottle of mineral water, almost empty, improvised cups made of aluminum foil, a package of 2 towels, a wedding ring tied to a reading glass inside Manuel's jacket, a wristwatch stored inside the pocket of Miguel's pants. They found some money inside a plastic bag hidden in Miguel's pants. It was about 157,000, I believe, dollars in their currency, Costa Rican dollars. And there was 40,000 hidden inside Manuel's jacket. There was a folded, unused handkerchief with the embroidered initials AMS. The receipt for the water bottle, matches, and cigarettes inside Miguel's pocket. 2 unused bus tickets from Niterói to Campos. Interestingly, not Sao Paulo, or wherever they were trying to go. Square pieces of cellophane paper impregnated with some kind of substance. A newspaper from August 17th. 2 masks beside the bodies. Crudely made masks shaped like sunglasses, but they're made of pure lead and have no eye holes. A handwritten paper with some electronic equations. Another handwritten paper with letters and numbers and some kind of a code. Another handwritten paper with instructions found inside Miguel's pocket. And to top it off, another handwritten paper with some medicine recipes. And then finally, a dirty notepaper with the word bonsai. This is a Japanese word, by the way, I think. And this is just me. Bonsai is kind of like a battle cry. It really kind of means, the technical term is 10,000 years, which is kind of used to express joy or triumph, but it's a shortened version of the traditional phrase Tenno Hyaka Banzai, which translates to long live His Majesty the Emperor. So it's kind of like a little battle phrase, interestingly. So the bodies are taken to the coroner's office later that day, which is very busy. And it's interesting because everyone is pushing to get these bodies done, and they're pressuring for the coroner to release the body eventually. But the coroner is absent, and contrary to protocols, an assistant takes care of Miguel and Manuel and performs the preparation for the autopsy himself, the removal of the internal organs. And he reported that there was no signs of violence or injury found on the bodies. So the autopsy is performed, and it's determined that the internal organs are too decomposed during those 2 days for reliable testing. Miguel and Manuel are buried at Caju Cemetery in Campos. A reporter goes to the coroner's office in Niterói and learns that the organs of Miguel and Manuel were simply discarded without any tests being performed on them, actually. Apparently, the organs had been sitting on the shelf for all those days and became too deteriorated to be of any use. Besides, the office lacked the proper regiments to perform all the tests, so they just threw them out and into the garbage, actually.
What?
Yeah. The case of Miguel and Manuel makes the news, and that's when the wife and her husband tell about the lights that they saw over the hill that night. There are also other people that call the police with similar stories to that. So that all happens within like a couple of weeks. August 27th of 1966, the federal police are brought into the case and start investigating in the 4 states of Rio de Janeiro, Guadalajara, Santo, and Sao Paulo. The Army, Navy, and Air Force Secret Service are also investigating this case and want to know if the alleged experiment, so the explosion, right, that happened on the beach when this first started happening, was of any importance to the case. So their friend E is arrested and brought to Niterói for an interrogation. August 31st of 1966, investigators at Campos searched the house of Estavos Fidelis de Morales, who was contacted by Miguel just before the explosion at the beach. Remember when this first started happening in June. They find that there's an antenna, but the transmitter that they had been excitedly talking about was sold. And we'll get into this in a little bit. They had no registered ham operators in the area yet, but the Navy intercepted a few transitions between the prefixes of CKJ21, CKJ22, and CKJ23 in the area 2 days before the explosion. Unknown to E, a lawyer enters to set him free, and the police comply with the orders. So E is set free. He also presents an alibi for the afternoon of August 17th, where he shows a receipt from an audio store in Campos, nearly 400 kilometers away from Niterói, where Miguel and Manuel died. Later that day, at the presumed time of death, Miguel and Manuel, he was later seen by his neighbors in the front of his house working on his car. So he's good. He's clear. He had nothing to do with it, allegedly. In September 1966, around 1 month after the bodies were released, while browsing Miguel's shop, an investigator finds a paper note that had been found with the bodies that was cut from a notebook at his house. He later returns to the coroner's office at Niterói to get the death certificates that were signed by the doctor. It's stated that due to the advanced decomposition, it is not possible to attest the cause of death. It is found in the first autopsy report a serious error. The name of the specialist was erased and replaced with another name, Walmore Gianni, and it's speculated that the first doctor did not agree with the report, so he requested to have his name removed from it. So there's maybe a bit of a cover-up happening. They exhumed the bodies, and the initial doctor, who didn't want to be associated with the first report, is assigned to the job. He finds that the bodies received an excess of formaldehyde, and because of that, it's not possible to perform a proper toxicology report, and because of that, the cause of death will remain unknown. So E testified, contrary to what Miguel and Manuel said, we're going to get into it, about the explosion. He said that they were the masterminds, and he just kind of went along with their invitation to watch the explosion happen at the beach. In his first testimony, he said they went from Arafanga in Miguel's car, and later on he changed it, saying Miguel's car was broken, so they went in his own car. Curious. Vladimir, who worked for Miguel and Manuel, says E lied to them about the experiment. According to him, E invited the three of them, Miguel, Manuel, and himself, to watch something supernatural down at the beach. But he did not disclose the details in advance. He said that the trip from Campos to the beach that night lasted less than an hour, 40 kilometers. He said that E went to the beach and the three men waited for 10 minutes. Then E came running back and they saw a huge red-purple light come down towards the water. E urged them to enter the car and get away because there was something bad about to happen. Vladimir remembers a strong smell of sulfur in the air, and he did not hear about any explosion at the time. Both Miguel and Manuel often came to E to seek help from the spiritual world. Miguel was asthmatic, and Manuel suffered from chronic diarrhea. Oof. According to Vladimir, E always gave good advice. The four friends, Miguel, Manuel, Vladimir, and E, used to gather at the shop for long spiritual sessions. Manuel and E were a bit more enthusiastic about the group, where Manuel was at first a little skeptic. The days before August 17th, Manuel is quoted as saying, "I'm going to watch an experiment. After that, I'm going to be able to tell you whether I believe it or not," allegedly. Police found that Miguel and Manuel performed other experiments in the cities of Masai, Campos, and Niterói on the state of Rio de Janeiro. And Cheesy Pete's, I can't pronounce that. So just put it up. And the military wanted to know if these experiments could have posed any threat to national security. Manuel's wife confirmed that Manuel participated in the beach experiment. She also confirmed that the lead masks were made by Miguel and Manuel the day before they traveled to Niterói. It seemed that they used a lead pipe as source for the material. In a bucket at Manuel's house, police found a cutout that matched the lead of the holes on the mask over the nose. At the time, Manuel explained to his wife that they needed the masks for work. At the shop, the police also found more lead masks. They also found a note with the instructions, which was Miguel's handwriting. But the terms like capsules are not believed to be part of his day-to-day vocabulary. And we'll get into what these capsules mean in a moment. The assumption is that some medical doctor dictated him to write these notes. The Engineering Institute of the Army stated that the masks did not contain any reactive material, and lots of people speculated that this was due to like a nuclear explosion that would have happened, but there's no radiation that was detected in these masks. The analysis was requested by the police because they didn't know the nature of the experiment that was performed on that day on the beach. People, including myself, don't suspect a lot of this hypothesis that's coming up, but some people theorize that there was a suicide pact. But there's also many contributing factors that make me kind of be like, I don't believe this, which is because there's missing money and they had the water bottle refund for the receipt. So like, why is there missing money? Where did the money go? There would have been no time in between then and there to lose that much money. And why would they ask for a refund if they weren't going to come back and get it? One line of investigation is also looking at espionage regarding their usage of radio transmissions. And it's interesting to note they were electronic technicians with the right expertise. They found codes with them. The hilltop was remote and isolated, which made it a good place for radio transmissions. Another line of investigation focuses on contraband. The newspaper from August 17th found on the scene had a story of a group of smugglers that was partially dismantled. 5 of the smugglers were identified, but 2 more still remained at loose, according to the papers. The police learned of a story on August 17th from a woman who said around 5 p.m. she had seen a Jeep with 5 men approaching her street. The men had parked their car and started climbing up the hill. The story was told to the police, and they said it was very strange because already at the time, the hill was starting to get dark and it was muddy, right? So muddy and raining. So it's not really that safe. Interesting to note, later on, so this is a couple years after, they exhumed the corpse again. And in 1968, the bones and tissue that were collected are sent to an Institute of Atomic Energy in Sao Paulo as a last measure to try to identify the cause of death. The result of the analysis was apparently lost in the mail. Highly suspicious, which delayed the investigation for a couple of weeks. And when the package arrived in Niterói, the technical police were baffled. They couldn't make heads or tails of the result. With the help of the technicians from the Atomic Institute, they determined that all elements were normal. And again, in September of 1968, a photographer captured the image of an unidentified flying object over the very same hill. The object stayed still for a few minutes, then went away at great speed. He said that the object emitted a silver light so intense he had to use a yellow filter on the camera. Many other people in Niterói say they saw the same object. On September of 1969, a man named Hamilton, a confessed criminal sentenced for 50 years for other crimes, admitted to a judge he knew the fate of Miguel and Manuel. He said on August 1966, he was invited by 3 burglars to participate in a job. They all met at the spiritual center in Niterói, where Miguel and Manuel, the victims, already awaited. Hamilton drove the 3 men and the 2 victims around town until one of the men asked him to stop. Hamilton waited in the car, and several minutes later, 3 men returned without Miguel and Manuel. He told Hamilton that they had forced the victims to ingest poison, got their money. Hamilton is brought to Niterói for interrogation, but the number of contradictions in his story, the police quickly determined he was lying. Hamilton's real intention was to leave the prison and try to escape while in Niterói. He's sent back to Sao Paulo and sued for false testimony. The initials on the handkerchief, right? Do you remember that? AMS?
Yes.
Was found to match someone named Ramanhana. We're going to go with that. R. In Recleve, which was a capital city in northeast Brazil. While there, he pretended to be a professor in parapsychology. So the story goes that he escaped police siege by hiding inside a refrigerator, and then he escaped to another state. Because of this new development, police were considering to reopen the lead masks case, but only and if he was arrested. The story gets a little confusing from here, since There's some reports that he was found in Rio de Janeiro or in Fortaleza in April of the same year. Irregardless, he was found, and there are reports of him saying that any and all attempts to arrest him would be futile, since he would use his magical powers to hypnotize any agents who came after him. But in 1972, he was able to escape the prison before the transfer. But in the next year, his magical powers must have failed him, since he was captured in April of 1973. This time, he was brought to Niterói. Unfortunately, 6 years later, they never were able to reopen the case after his arrest. So they didn't really find anything. Back to the UFO phenomenon. In 1980, on April, Jacques, an academic who had worked for NASA and a leading expert in UFO phenomenon, comes to Brazil to investigate the case. He climbs the hill and talks to police detectives and reporters that covered the case, and he noted the spot where the bodies were found was barren. Grass hadn't grown since. So that's the timeline of the case. So remember the autopsy, right? The mishandled one? There was a significant decomposition of their internal organs, which they couldn't be tested though for, right? Consequently, their initial toxicology analysis was unable to detect the presence of harmful substances. So later on, they exhumed and conducted for specific toxins like arsenic, mercury, barium, and thallium, and these test results yield negative results. It wasn't able to rule out a wider range of other potential toxic substances or drugs, to be noted. Some sources say that the official cause of death was ultimately recorded as heart attacks. That's so fucking weird, though. Like, someone cut down these leaves, put these bodies on their backs. They were wearing their masks, their suits, these ponchos, and then they just died of heart attacks from that.
Yeah, and like both of them.
At the same time. So, I mean, an initial toxology request might have shed light on the cause of death, but due to the incomplete nature, we might never, or we probably will never know what actually happened due to them dying. So, one of the most prominent theories attempting to explain the death of Manuel and Miguel was that they were involved in a group known as the scientific spiritualists that we were talking about a little bit, right? This theory poses that the two men were actively engaged in attempts to contact extraterrestrial beings or spirits. It's believed that they were employed with psychedelic drugs to help facilitate these counters that would have led them to believe that such interactions would have been accompanied by bright light, hence them needing their masks, right? The theory concludes that they ultimately succumbed to the overdose of these drugs, and the supporting theory is the cryptic note that was found at the scene of the crime, which indicated instructions about ingesting capsules and of waiting to use the signals for the masks. Furthermore, investigators discovered that there was mask-making materials and literatures pertaining to spiritualism at their residence. So, back to the beach experiment. They went to this tourist point in São José del Barra, next to Campos. At 9 p.m., there was a huge explosion that lit up the sky. There was a huge ball of fire, and it was heard from 10 kilometers away. Witnesses say they felt the ground shaking in the surroundings, where nearby houses suffered minor damages. It caused panic. The rumor at the time was that a flying saucer went down into the ocean. A local says that he saw a lighted ship in the distance, and then all of a sudden, it was gone. The explosion drew attention from the Navy, which later started an investigation, which we kind of talked about a little bit already. So police obviously heard this, and they went out to the beach after they felt their whole building shake. And on the beach, they smelled a strong sulfur coming from the track on the sand. And it looked like tire marks. So he reported this to his superiors. After some time after the explosion, Miguel contacted someone via the ham radio, which was some 300 miles away from the beach, which is just interesting to know. There's a whole bunch of shit that probably happened, which we might never know about. While the scientific spiritualist theory offers an interesting story that kind of aligns with some of the unusual aspects of the case. There are other possible explanations that have been proposed. Obviously, we can't rule out the possibility of foul play. The missing sum of money that Manuel was initially carrying suggests robbery as the motive. However, there was no sign of a struggle, and it seems very weird that they would stage the bodies in that kind of way. Another possible avenue to explain this is there was also foul play involving the idea of poisoning. So, regarding the cryptic notes that were found, the instructions read 4:30 to be on the hill, 6:30 ingest capsules after the effect, and then comma, protect metals, await for signal mask. The instructions lacked punctuation and the intended effect is ambiguous. The second line could read ingested capsules after effect or ingest capsules after the effect. Like it's all kind of one word. There's no punctuation. It's hard to tell what's going on. The third line could read protect metals, wait for the signal, use mask, right? Or it could also read protect metals, like protect these metals that you're wearing, wait for the signal from the mask. The fact the wedding ring and the wristwatch were also found inside their clothes could have related to the protect metals. And it's also just like really weird that a robber wouldn't steal like a wedding ring and a watch, right? So there was other notes, right? So one paper note reads, Monday 1 capsule in the morning while fasting. Tuesday 1 capsule after meal. Wednesday 1 capsule when lying down. A third note reads, buy a 500-meter long thread roll. There was also a silver blue paper with equation of Ohm's law. Ohm's law is basically like for their electrician thing, where it states that the electric current comes through a conductor between 2 points, and it's directly proportional to the voltage across 2 points. It's basically just like a mathematical equation that introduces the resistance and voltage of an electric current, and it's just a way of measuring it. The note in reference to the 2 capsules could suggest that the men intentionally were poisoned, perhaps misled about the nature of the substance they were ingesting. The lead masks in the scenario might have been intended as a form of protection against a perceived danger such as radiation, which is why everyone was like, yo, you better get that tested, as if they were deceived into believing they were being involved in like something hazardous. And I mean, like, if I was about to meet an alien too, I would probably be like, yo, I better like suit up. They probably got like some weird disease, radiation, something. So I mean, I can get down with that maybe a little bit. Like it could have been a con man too, like a third party possibly connected to their spiritual group, someone they encountered in Nidoroy. Remember that 21 minutes that was unaccounted for? It could have been responsible for their deaths as well. An accidental death scenario is also a consideration. Even if Miguel and Manuel were intentionally using psychedelic drugs for spiritual purposes, the possibility of the accidental overdose is still an explanation. While they were wearing suits, the added layer of raincoats may suggest that they anticipated being exposed to the elements for a long time, and the prolonged exposure potentially exacerbated their drug usage, and that might have contributed to their deaths. This seems less likely given their attire, though. Like, it just seems like they were more prepared than what was going on. And they also had water, too, so I don't know. And like I said, there's people who saw an oval-shaped thing the night that guys died. The area is rumored to be a hotspot for UFO sightings. Some theories propose that they were attempting to make contact with them, and the lead masks were speculated to be protection against radiation, like I mentioned, or the intense light emanating from the spacecraft. It's important to note, though, the lead masks case was not an isolated incident in Brazil during this period. In 1962, 4 years prior to the death of Manuel and Miguel, a similar case occurred in the same general area involving a man named Hermes. He was found dead with a lead mask covering his face. Investigations into his death reportedly revealed he was attempting to use psychic abilities to receive radio signals without the use of electronic equipment. Interesting. The similarities between the two cases involving the lead masks, the proximity of the location, and the profession of the victims, both of them were involved in electronics, is really fucking weird. In the shop where the guy lived, they found a book called Viva no Planetara Marte, which is Life on the Planet Mars. It was filled with written notes, and it prefaced that the author of the book said that the text was dictated to him by a spiritual entity named Ramades. This book informs us that Mars is an inhabited planet, and it describes a great deal many aspects of the Martian civilization, family, education, culture, religion, entertainment, technology, industry, transport, government, among so much more. There's a chapter called Airships, Spaceships, and Flying Saucers that talks about Martian spaceship technology, and another one is called Interplanetary Voyages. The chapter Reincarnation explains that the spirit of a human dies on Earth to be reincarnated as a Martian, but native Martians can tell if they're a native or a foreign person, i.e. like a human that died. Really interesting book. Investigations concluded that Manuel and Miguel had no connection to Hermes, suggesting that the similarities might have been coincidental or indicative of a broader, perhaps localized in interest in unconventional practices at the time. Reoccurrence of the lead masks in unexplained deaths in the same region is really fucking weird. And the fact that they're both electronic technicians might be like, okay, like maybe electronic technicians, maybe not like every single one, but like maybe it's just like they're maybe predisposed to like wanting to experiment or like believe in things. I don't know. So yeah, that's just a couple of the theories. Like the theories in this case go really hard. And further to go on about the capsules, it's suggested that the ingestion of the capsules was expected to produce some kind of effect that would necessitate the protection of their eye gear. One interpretation is that the raincoats they purchased were also meant to protect them, possibly from the reaction of the capsules. I don't know. It's so weird. Everyone's just kind of guessing and trying to figure out what happened. Another possibility is they also had some kind of electronic equipment with them, even though there was nothing found at the scene. Maybe like someone came by and stole it. I don't know. I feel like if you saw a dead body, you would have reported it though. But there was also missing money, right? So maybe whoever took the money would take this electronic equipment, but not take the watches and the wedding ring.
But it's also like super sketchy that the police didn't go immediately. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, like the lack of kind of caring as far as the police goes on this case is just weird. And then for the army and literally everyone else to be involved like later on is crazy. Some sources also note that the grammar in the note is somewhat nonsensical, and it was kind of written by, some people say, it was written by someone who was under the influence of like a substance or not entirely fluent in the language, even though it's like his handwriting. Despite over a century, the lead masks case officially remains unsolved. There are no definitive answers in this case that fully explain the bizarre circumstances regarding the death of Manuel and Miguel. There's no official reopenings of the case or significant new pieces of evidence that have come to light since the initial investigation in 1966. Nonetheless, the case continues to generate interest and speculation. There's so many documentaries, podcasts, articles, and online forums just dedicated to unraveling this mystery. Like, this is truly just like the tip of the iceberg I'm able to talk about. It goes so much more deeper. Yeah, there's just so much unexplained shit that happens, and the lack of conclusive resolution after so many years is mind-boggling. Like, at some point, it feels like maybe we would have found someone who was like, yeah, no, I killed them, it's fine, or like blood on someone's hands. I don't know. But it remains a compelling and enduring enigma. There's two key facts to this case. There's two electronic technicians who were found dead in unusual attire, wearing lead masks, with a cryptic note detailing the sequence time of their actions. And then there's the second part, which is a whole bunch of theories. So, I don't know. Yeah. Let us know what you think down in the comments. Do you think it was an accidental overdose, robbery, UFOs? There's so many questions left unanswered in this case. And yeah, even now, people are still trying to put something together that kind of makes a solution, but it's so wild. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.